Well, welcome this week to our first sermon in our Advent series, My Favourite Christmas Story. And we're bringing Christmas forward a little bit this year on the basis of, the lockdown of the past few weeks and the realisation, that we all need a bit more comfort and joy this year. So, my favourite Christmas story is the Annunciation of the birth of Jesus in Luke chapter 1, verses 26 to 38. Now, I don't know about you, but Sandra and I have just finished watching the latest season 4 of the Netflix series, The Crown. It's so brilliantly made and generally, it's reasonably accurate. And this season has been dominated, of course, by the life of Princess Diana. I hadn't realised just how young she was when she got married. Only a young girl when she first met Prince Charles, courted at 18 and then married at 19. Her beauty blossomed as she grew up, but her life was marred by pursuit from journalists and photographers, which of course ended finally in tragedy at the age of only 36 in a fatal car crash. And if you ask any news editor what sells the best stories, they will say celebrity, sex, royalty and religion. And Princess Diana's story certainly had all those things. And my favourite Christmas story has most of those components too. First, sex. And it's true, isn't it, that we live in a sex-obsessed world, which for something which God invented for the good of humanity, I think is pretty sad. And the world degrades sex in that it says, it's about me, it's about my pleasure, my performance. And yet at the same time, it kind of deifies sex, saying that if you're not having sex, you can't be fulfilled or free. And the story of the Annunciation is great because it debunks all of this. The angel Gabriel comes to a young woman, a virgin, pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, probably at least 10 years her senior, which is very similar to the age difference between Charles and Diana. But instead of a fairy tale story of a young maiden swept off her feet by a handsome prince, Mary is promised something far riskier and hazardous and yet wonderful. Perfect love with God. And despite words of reassurance from the messenger in the words, "Greetings, you are highly favoured, the Lord is with you," the text tells us that in a really real way that Mary was greatly troubled at his words, and having had God's plan explained to her, she questions, "How will this be since I am a virgin?" And Gabriel makes it very clear that Jesus will be conceived in Mary's womb before she has any sexual relations, making him the one and only truly special one. And I suspect the choice of Mary by God was on the same basis that Diana was chosen by the royal family for Charles, if the TV programme The Crown is to be believed, because her past life was pure and innocent without any skeletons in the cupboard. Incredible though this story sounds today, Bible scholars such as the very reliable N.T. Wright point out that two very independent sources of the infancy of Jesus, the Gospel writers Matthew and Luke, could hardly have invented a more miraculous story of Jesus' origins, going against even the ancient world's knowledge of human biology and the conception of human beings. As he quotes in his commentary on Luke, why would these two writers and devout Jewish Christian congregations have passed on these stories unless they had good reason to suppose they were true? And this part of the story is that to have perfect love with God through Jesus far surpasses any number of sexual experiences. And what is wonderful about the publication of the Church of England's Living in Love and Faith report and the videos on the website, including the CEEC's video, The Beautiful Story, are the number of single people who have considered their union of love and faithfulness with Jesus far higher than desperately searching for a human partner. So, sex, but no sex. Not that Mary didn't go on to have a whole tribe of children with Joseph later. That should never be contested. But then the media editor's next favourite headline, royalty. And this is where the Matthew and Luke genealogies of Jesus are fascinating. And I've spoken on this in the past. But, Matthew traces the stepfather of Jesus, Joseph, back to Jehoniah and then through to David's son Solomon. However, we know by reading the Old Testament prophet Jeremiah that a descendant of Jehoniah could never have become king because of the curse pronounced by God on Jeconiah in Jeremiah chapter 22, verses 24 to 30, which ends, "No man of his descendants will prosper sitting on the throne of David or rule again in Judah." And according to Matthew's genealogy, Joseph had the blood of Jeconiah in his veins. He was not qualified to sit on David's throne. He was not the heir apparent. And this would also mean that no blood son of Joseph would have the right to claim the throne of David. Therefore, if Jesus were the real son of Joseph, he would not have qualified for sitting on David's throne. He would have been disqualified. Neither could he claim the right to David's throne by virtue of his adoption by Joseph, since Joseph was not the heir apparent. The purpose of Matthew's genealogy then is to show why Jesus could not be king if he really were Joseph's son. The purpose was not to show the royal line. For this reason, Matthew starts his gospel with the genealogy, presents the Jeconiah problem, and then proceeds with the account of the virgin birth, from which, from Matthew's viewpoint, is the solution to the Jeconiah problem. In summary, Matthew deduces that if Jesus were really Joseph's son, he could not claim to sit on David's throne because of the Jeconiah curse. But Jesus was not Joseph's son, for he was born of the Virgin Mary. And that's when Luke's genealogy of Jesus affirms his rightful place as being in the royal line of David through Mary. But in Jewish literature at the time, women were never mentioned, of course, in family trees, and their husbands were. Therefore, Luke, in chapter 3, verse 23, said, Jesus was the son, so it was thought, of Joseph, the son of Heli. But Heli was the father of Mary, not Joseph. Through that line, Jesus' bloodline could be traced back to another of David's sons, Nathan. Therefore, Jesus could take up his rightful place as heir, but through Nathan, not Solomon's line. The royalty thread is therefore potent in this story, and again, it's all tied back to the virgin birth. But imagine too the potency of this story as a challenge to the rulers and royalty of the day, to Herod, the puppet king put in place by the Romans, not even anything to do with Jewish blood, and to their pagan emperor. So that brings us on to the third point, finally, religion. Well, the angel Gabriel tells Mary that she has found special favour with God. She has been chosen to carry the Messiah, the one who will save, hence the name Jesus, which means God saves. He will be the Son of the Most High God, and his kingdom will never end. This, friends, was the fulfilment of the promises of God that all faithful Jewish people had been waiting for. And in the sermon notes, I'm going to attach 44 prophecies from the Old Testament referenced with the New. And they go like this. The Messiah would be born of a woman, born in Bethlehem, born of a virgin, from the line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the tribe of Judah. He would be called Emmanuel and would spend a season in Egypt, and a massacre of children would happen in his birthplace. A messenger would prepare his way. He would be called a Nazarene, but he would be rejected by his own people. He would speak in parables, sent to heal the brokenhearted, would be praised by little children, then betrayed, falsely accused, yet silent before his accusers, before being spat on and struck. He would be hated without cause, crucified with common criminals, given vinegar to eat, would have his hands and feet pierced. He would be mocked and ridiculed, forsaken by God, before dying and being buried with the rich. The Messiah would then be resurrected from the dead, ascend to heaven and be seated at God's right hand and be a sacrifice for sin. Well, that's probably enough religious warrant for anyone. A newspaper editor would have a field day with any of those stories, I suspect. So that's really the basis of my favourite Christmas story. It's complex, it's full of twists and turns, it's full of clues that go back and back to previous stories. Today, Diana's story still has a strong sense of power about it. I have to say, for a week, I've been captivated by it in The Crown and various Diana documentaries. I even discovered her driver and bodyguard was called Colin Tebbert. No relative, though. But I wonder whether the story will still have the same power in 100 years, or even 1,000, never mind 2,000 years. The reason why the Christmas story is often called the greatest story ever told is just that, because it has endured and still fills us with awe, comfort and joy, because it is not a story about celebrity, sex, royalty, or even religion. Instead, it's a story of God's deep love for humanity, and that through humility, wonder, and the faithfulness of vulnerable, ordinary people like Mary, they could be filled with the supernatural power of God to ensure extraordinary things can happen. That's week 1, my favourite story. What's next? I can't wait until next week's thrilling episode. See you again soon.